So we're up to the Gemara in the Pei Testament Aleph, a few lines into the page. Amar of Abba, Kosha Gezel Hanechal. If someone steals something and then they spend it and they consume it, it's very challenging because you can't return the item. If you steal an item and you return it, okay, at least it's easy to rectify. But once the item is consumed, it's very challenging. Shafil tzadikim gemurim in yichol machzira, that even great tzadikim can't return it because it doesn't exist anymore. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, this is why it's mentioned, because we mentioned yesterday, at the end of yesterday's daf, that Avraham Avinu refused to take from the booty of the Milchama against Sodom with the 4 and the 5 kings. The reason being is because Avraham Avinu perceived it as Geneva. The pasuk says, "Bil'odai rak asher achlu hanorim," that the only thing Avraham Avinu could not return was the items that have already been consumed. So you see that once it's already consumed, it's challenging even for a big tzaddik. Amar Rav Yechon Mishum Lazar of Shimon. Rabbi Yechon said in the name of Elazar bar Shimon, Kol Malkum Shatamoyt Dvar Shav Lazar B'noi Shav Yesi Haglili B'Haggadah. Anytime you have a teaching from Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rav Yesi Haglili, regarding Agadata, Asei Oznacha B'Karpeches. You should make your ear like a funnel. I mean, you should always listen to it because there's always a lot of depth there. He made the following drasha. Now, this is a pasuk in Devarim. Loi meruvchem mikol ha'amim choshek Hashem b'chem. That Hashem doesn't choose Klal Yisrael because we're numerous. We're actually very small, and yet Hashem chooses us. So the Gemara is going to explain it's dafka because of our humility. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. Hashem said to Klal Yisrael, Chashkani b'chem. I want to have a relationship with you. Why? Shafilu b'shah shani mashpil lechem gedula. Because even when I give you greatness, atem emaytem asmechem afanai. You humble yourself before me. Historically, whenever Hashem gave greatness to the Avos, they humbled themselves. They didn't let it, didn't create an ego. Nasati gedula la'Avram. I gave greatness to Avram Avinu. He was very wealthy. And what did Avram Avinu say? Anochi afav efer. I'm dirt and ash. Moshe and Aaron. And Moshe and Aaron had greatness. And what did they say? Nachnu ma. We are nothing. What are we? Even a higher madrigal, the Gemara is going to point out. At least dirt and ash is still something. We're nothing. David Amar v'anoichi talas v'liyish. David HaMelech, as great as he was in power and finance, he said, "I'm but a worm and not man." That's all Klal Yisrael. But when it comes to Goyim, it's not like that. Nasati gedula Nimrod. I gave greatness to Nimrod, and what did he say? Hava nivna lanu yir. Let's build a tower to fight Hashem. Leparoi, I gave it to Paroi, and he says, "Mi Hashem, who is this God that I should listen to?" L'Sancherev, I gave it to Sancherev, and what did he say? Mi b'chol l'kei ratzos. Who amongst all the gods that can save you? L'Nebuchadnezzar, and he says, Alam, say Av. I'll go to the top of the clouds and fight Hashem. Chas v'shalom. L'chira melech tzur. For Chir melech tzur, he says, Moshe v'lekim yashafti b'lev yamim. I sit on the seat of God amongst the seas. So you see that's the difference between Klal Yisrael and the Goyim. Amar Rav v'tem Rav Yochanan. Gadol shenemar b'Moshe v'Aaron Yosem asher Amar Avram. The response that Moshe and Aaron had, we had before, which is Anachnu ma, is an even higher madrega than Avram Avinu, who said that he's Anochi afav efer. Tila b'Avram ksiv Anochi afav efer. V'il Moshe Aaron ksiv Anachnu ma. Because afav efer is still something. It's a very, very high level of humility and a high level of bittul, but it's still something. But to say, but regarding Moshe and Aaron, they said, Nachnu ma, what are we? We're nothing. But Amar Rav v'tem Rav Yochanan, Ein oilam eskayim l'shem Moshe v'Aaron. The whole world stood on the schus of Moshe and Aaron, because it says, V'nachnu ma, the word ma, uksiv, and it also says, this is a pasuk in Iyov, which we say in B'chol Ma'aminim on Yom Kippur, Toila eretz al balima. He holds the world on, balima means nothingness, but ma is referring to Moshe and Aaron, who said, Anachnu ma, the whole world is hanging on them. Amar Aviloi, Ein oilam eskayim b'shemi shekulam sheboilim is atzmai b'sham meriva. The whole world exists in the schus of someone who muzzles himself in the middle of a fight. He doesn't speak back. Shal Torah eretz al balima. And balima is from a lashon of boilim, which means to muzzle, close. Rava oimer, mi shemesim atzmai kemi she'enai. The world exists in the schus of someone who makes himself as if he's not existence. Shneimar umitachas zaros oilam. And the pasuk says, below the world's arms. The deeper pshat is that the world's arms, you're supposed to read it a little differently. It's not below the world's arm, means below are the world's arm, meaning The world's arms, what keeps the world going, is below, is someone who makes himself low. Amr Yitzchak, Mai Dechsiv, Ha'umnam Eilem Tzadik Tidaberun Meisharim Tishbedu B'nei Adam. The pasuk says, "Is there silence, righteousness? Should you speak with mishpat? You judge people. What does this mean? Ha'umnam Eilem. What does this mean? Ma umnasei shel adam elam hazeh. You know what the person's job in this world is? Yasam asma ki elam means like a mute. A person should make himself like a mute to not speak back and not to fight. Now, you might think that it's good to be a mute when it comes to learning, meaning not to learn. No, you should speak tzedek, speak about Torah. Now, you might think that it's okay if someone learns Torah to let it go to his head and to make him to allow him to be a Bal Gaiva. With righteousness you judge. You can't. So Meisharim is with equalness, meaning equal. You don't look at yourself as higher than anybody else, despite your learning. Okay. Amar of Zeira v'Timur Rabbi Yirmiyah mechasin ba'afar ir nidachas. You're allowed to cover blood, kisi adam, with the dirt of an ir nidachas. Ir nidachas has to be completely destroyed. And he's seemingly from the Gemara saying is that you're allowed to take the ash of the ir nidachas and use it to cover kisi adam. Amai, says the Gemara, why? Isuri hanahu, but isn't the dirt and the ash of ir nidachas asabahana? You're not allowed to get enough from it, so how are you allowed to do this? So the Gemara, there's a famous answer of mitzvah lav lahedesinu, that a mitzvah is not hana, but we'll get to that in a second. Zeiri has a different shot. He says, you're right, it doesn't mean you're allowed to use the dirt, which has to be burnt, or the ash, which also has a din of isana. It means the earth under the dirt, right? The dirt on top has to be burnt, but the dirt under it that has to be shoveled, that does not have to be burnt. That's not asa b'hana. So you can use that for kisi adam. The earth under the earth, meaning not the top layer of dirt, that must be burnt of an ir nidachas, under that, because that doesn't have to be burnt. How do I know that doesn't have to be burnt? It's not asa b'hana, and therefore it's allowed to be used for kisi adam. T'chsiv is kol shalala tikboitz al teich rechav v'sarafta. You should gather all the items in the city to the center square and burn it. Meaning, you only have to burn something that just needs to be gathered. But this excludes the earth under the dirt, because that is not just enough to gather, you have to dig. So because you have to dig, it's not included in the Isser, and therefore it's not asmano, and therefore you're allowed to use it for kisi adam. That's the first explanation. Rabbi says a much more fundamental answer throughout Shas, which is mitzvahs lav lahenes ninu. What's your problem? It's asa b'hana, so how are you allowed to use it for kisi adam? A mitzvah is lav hana. Hana is for human pleasure. Using Mekayim mitzvah is not considered Hana. It's not considered Hana. So that would mean that something that's also Hana could be used for a mitzvah. Yasser v'ina kamal hashmaita eis v'ruchumi l'ravina shayfer shalom k'chom la'i takabai. It says you should not use a shayfer of a avodah zarah to blow shayfer. You're not allowed to use the horn of an avodah zarah to blow shayfer. Now, because it's disgusting. But my lav im takala yotza is that not the implication that if you were to use it, you would not be yotza. Why? Because it's aser b'hana. Now, even though this is a mitzvah, so you see that it's aser b'hana, and we don't say mitzvah lav lahenes ninu. Because if a mitzvah is not considered hana, then it should be that b'di'evet, if you use the shofar, everyone agrees you should not use the shofar l'chachila. That's for sure, because it's a bezayin. The question is b'di'evet. If you hold mitzvah lav lahenes ninu, it's not hana, so then you could use it b'di'evet. But if you hold that a mitzvah is a hana, because there's a hana, it's a mekayim mitzvah, I'm happy that it was mekayim mitzvah, then a shayfer is asa b'hana, so you would not be yoytza. So he says, are we not pasking that it's not yoytza? Where's the law? You're talking yoytza. No, you're yoytza b'di'evet, because mitzvah lav l'henes ninu. Okay, similar shayla, lulav shalavi kachavim, lo yitol, you're not supposed to take a lulav of idolatry. My lavim not yotza. Isn't the psak that if you take it, you're not yotza? So you see that b'di'evet is a problem, because it's asa b'hana. And so you see that mitzvahs lav lahenes ninu. So says the Gemara, Allah yim not yotza. No. If you take it with the Yeved yotza, because mitzvahs lav lahenes ninu. So you're telling me that because mitzvah lav lahenes ninu, you could use an isar na for a mitzvah. Therefore, b'di'evet you could take the shofar. B'di'evet you could take the lulav. Oh, Here's the problem. There's a brisa that says explicitly not like that. The brisa says, Satanya, Taka lo yotza, Nota lo yotza. The brisa clearly states that if you blow the shofar with an shofar avodah zarah, you're not yotza. If you take a lulav avodah zarah, you're not yotza. Clear as day, you're not yotza. But why? If mitzvahs lav lehenes nu, you should be able to be yotza. So the Gemara says, I'll say it outside, we'll see it inside. The issue with a shofar and a lulav is not just hana. It's not just really mitzvahs lav lehenes nu. So why you're not yotza b'diavad? Those items need to have a shear. A lulav has to have a certain size. Has to be a certain amount of tvachim. The shofar has to be a certain size. Because these items need to be burnt, it's as if they're already burnt. The ketute mechta shiure, they're missing their shear. So it's not just hana. If it was just hana, it would be fine. But the other problem is that they have to have a shear, and because they're meant to be burnt, it's ki'ilu they don't have a shear. Says the Gemara, Amar Rashi, Haki Hashta Hasam. Go to the next page. Shiur binun. These items require a shear, a size, a minimum size. And because these items are idolatry and they are obligated to be burnt, because they have to be pulverized. So too, but when it comes to kisei adam, the more it's pulverized, the better. Meaning, the problem is not just hana. The problem is that something that is avodah zarah, it misses its shear. Kisei adam doesn't have a shear. It's not like there's a size of the granules that they have to be. The smaller, the better. They just have to be able to cover. They can practically cover. But for shofar and lulav, because there's a minimum shear, these items do not have the requisite shiurim because kol ha'oimid lisuf kisarif dami, and it's ketute mechta shiuri hajun Allah kisay hadam. Okay, new parak gid hanasha. Zok the Mishnah, gid hanasha, the isser of eating the gid hanasha, the sciatic nerve, is noig ba'aretz, b'chutz la'aretz. It applies both in Eretz Yisrael and chutz la'aretz. B'fnei abayis, shalei b'fnei abayis. When there was a Beis Hamikdash after the Churban, b'chulin u'mikdashim, it applies to chulin, it applies to karbanos. You're not allowed to eat the carbon or get a nash of a carbon either. Noig b'behema b'chaya, it applies to a behema and a chaya. Now, which sciatic nerve? The right side, the right thigh or the left thigh? B'yerech shel yamin or b'yerech shel shmal? Both in the right and in the left. But it does not apply to birds because they don't have a spoon-shaped flesh on the thigh. The gid hanasha is behind the spoon, this piece of flesh that looks like a spoon, and because birds don't have that, therefore they don't have a gid hanasha. Benoig b'shlil, and it applies to a fetus as well. What this means is that if you shecht an animal, and you find a 9-month-old fetus inside, it doesn't require shchita. Right, I mean, Meir disagrees, but Pashas doesn't require shechita because the shechita the mother covers it, and more than this, you're able to eat the gid hanasha of that ben pekua. Rav Yehuda says, v'noyeg b'shalil. This Tanakama is Rav Meir, who says that it requires its own shechita, and therefore the sciatic nerve of the 9-month-old ben pekua is also aser. Rav Yehuda Omer eina noyeg b'shalil. Rav Yehuda says it does not apply to a fetus, meaning a fetus that you find inside the mother, you're allowed to eat the gid hanasha. You're allowed to eat its chaylev. So because it does not require its own shechita, you could eat the chaylev and the gid hanasha. But ve'ena tabachim ne'nonim al gid hanasha. Butchers are not trusted to say that they remove the gid hanasha. They're Rameir. Because Rameir holds that removing the gid hanasha, it's not just the ikr nerve. You have to remove all the nerves that branch out, and it's a very time-consuming, very challenging thing to do. So therefore, a butcher is not named to say that he did it. No, the Chum say no. A butcher is trusted to say that he removed the gid hanasha, and he's also trusted to say that he removed chaylev. Okay. So the Mishnah said that you're not allowed to eat the gid hanasha of a carbon. So the Gemara says, Mukdashim Pshita. It's Pashit. Why would I think it's allowed? Mashum the Akdashe. Paki le Isser gid hanasha. Do I think that because it becomes a carbon, the Isser of gid hanasha poof magically goes away? Why would I think that? So what is the Chiddush of the Gemara? Now, it says the Gemara like this. Now here's the Shaila. If let's say I eat the gid hanasha of a carbon, how many Isurim am I over? So you have gid hanasha, that's one. L'chora, I should also be over the Isser of Me'ilah, which is benefiting from a carbon unwarranted. You're not supposed to eat that part of the carbon, therefore you're eating something of the carbon. You're getting hana from a carbon, that's an Isser Me'ilah. Now the Gemara understands that the only time there'd be an Isser Me'ilah is if you eat a part of the carbon that has a flavor. has to have a flavor. It has to have, if you eat the hoof of a carbon, you're not going to be over there. It's a me'ila. There's a general shayla throughout the Tanoim, as we'll see, of whether the gid hanasha itself has any flavor. Does it have tam? Now it's negeya. Let's say the gid hanasha gets cooked with other meat. So generally, because iser has flavor, you need shishim. Right? A piece of chayla falls in, you need shishim to mevatel it. The question is, do you need shishim by gid hanasha? So it has to do with whether gid hanasha has flavor. If it has meat flavor, then you need shishim. If it's just a hard sinew that has no flavor, then it will be batal barov. So the Gemara says a relevant shayla: if I eat the gid hanasha of a carbon, if it has flavor, then I'll be over gid hanasha and me'ila. If it doesn't have flavor, just gid hanasha. So perhaps the Mishnah, when it says that the gid hanasha applies to a carbon, the chiddush is to say that gid hanasha has flavor. And what the purpose of the Mishnah is telling me, not that it applies to a carbon, but that if you eat the gid hanasha of a carbon, you'll get two sets of lashes. One for gid hanasha and one for getting hana from karbanos. The chitim, and if you want to say that that's the possible pshat of the Mishnah, the chiddush of the Mishnah is that yesh begidim nosin tam. That our Tana believes that the gid hanasha has flavor, and therefore if you eat it, asi iser mukdashim v'chaya iser gid. So this animal was born with a gid hanasha, so it started off with a gid hanasha that's aser. When you makdish it, the iser of me'ila applies to that gid hanasha as well. It's chal on the gid hanasha. If you eat the gid hanasha because it has a good flavor, you're over two isur. The problem is, if that's the chiddush of the Mishnah, then the lush of the Mishnah, it's not great. What's the lush of the Mishnah? That the gid hanasha applies to karbanos. It's not really that the gid hanasha applies to karbanos, it's that the isser of karbanos, of me'ila, applies to the gid hanasha. You understand? It's like you're focusing on the wrong point. If the whole point of the Mishnah is the gid hanasha has flavor, and therefore me'ila applies, it shouldn't be that the Mishnah says that the gid hanasha applies to a carbon. That's not the point. It's that the isser of karbanos applies to the gid hanasha. So it's a little bit hay mukdashanai begimi boile. So it says the Gemara, rather, this is what it means to say. It's the opposite. Kasavar, the Tana of our Mishnah, believes, Ein begivin noisin tam. The gid hanasha does not have any flavor on its own. And therefore, if you eat it of a carbon, the only isser you're over is gid hanasha, not me'ila. And that's the point of the Mishnah. Umukdashin, the Mishnah means to say that when you eat a carbon's gid hanasha, isser gid ika, isser mukdashim leka. There's only gid hanasha, and not the isser of me'ila, because it doesn't have a flavor. Because our Tana believes that gid hanashas do not have flavor. Here's the problem: is that true? V'savar Tana didan ein begidim noisin tam. Is that the Tana of our Mishnah of Tanan? But look at the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah says, Yerech shenizbach shel gid hanasha. If you cook a thigh with the gid hanasha inside of it, im yesh bo noisin tam harei asur. You need shishim. It says that there's a flavor. So the Tana definitely holds there's a flavor. So you can't tell me that the Tana of our Mishnah holds there's no flavor for gid hanasha and only applies to gid hanasha, and only isser is gid hanasha, not me'ila. That's not the Tana Shita. The Tana clearly states that there is tam by a gid hanasha. So rather, the Gemara goes back to the original pshat, which is that karbanos have an isser gid hanasha. So the Gemara had said before, why would I think otherwise? Why would I think that the gid hanasha doesn't apply to karbanos? Because we thought we were talking about a regular animal that has an isser gid hanasha, and then when it's 5 years old, you make it a carbon. So what was the chiddush? That the isser of karbanos is chal. Why would making it a carbon remove the gid hanasha? So the Gemara says it's not the case. Hacha bevlados kachim askinan. Over here we're talking about a case where it's the baby inside of a shlamim. You have a carbon, and then the animal becomes pregnant. So that inside baby, at the same time that it's developing its gid hanasha, it's a carbon at the same time. Kasavar noig b'shlil. The Tana holds that the isser gid hanasha applies to a fetus. And so inside the fetus, it has the gid hanasha developing, which becomes aser in the fetus. And also that's when it becomes holy as a carbon. It doesn't become a carbon when it's born. It's inside as well. So it's happening at the exact same time. The isser gid, the isser mukdashin bahade hadad ika asid. The isser gid and the isser of karbanos are happening at the same time. So because they're happening at the same time, the chiddush of the Mishnah is that there's an isser gid hanasha as well. So the point of the Mishnah is that it's talking about a vlad. Here's the problem though. The Vlad is the next part of the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah mentions that it applies to Chullin Mikdashin, and then it says, V'noyig b'shlil, Rav Yehuda Omer, Eina noyig b'shlil. So if you're telling me that Mikdashin is a shlil, isn't that referred to later on? Umi matzis mukmila b'shlil, v'hamikdani seifa noyig b'shlil, mechad areish alav b'shlil askinon. So the Gemara says, Hachikamar davar zeh machlekes Rav Yehuda Rabbanu. This is how you're supposed to read it. This concept of a shlil that we've established by Mukdashin is really a machlokes of Yehuda the Rabbanon, and then it proceeds to describe the machlokes of Yehuda and the Rabbanon. I will stop here.